I want to now step back and look at the big picture. It feels to me that as a country, we've been here many times before. Dr. Vandana Shiva, let me bring in your first thoughts.
Well, my life has been shaped by these mountains. I am from Uttarakhand, and my ecological life has been shaped by the Chipko movement, which began after 72 and a disaster in the Alaknanda Ghati, where women of the Rainy village rose up, the same Rainy village, and said this logging is causing disasters and landslides. 10 years the Chipko movement fought. The logging was stopped. There's still a logging ban, but now we've got new ways to destroy the mountains. The 2013 disaster, we did a very detailed study. Of course, the Chorabari Glacier above Kedarnath, the snows had melted, created a lake which burst. But in addition, the tunneling needs blasting with dynamite. This is the most fragile ecosystem of the world, the Himalaya, the youngest mountain chain. And when you burst the mountains with dynamite, we did a study of every landslide. We mapped every landslide. It was above the tunnels. These were forested areas that have never had landslides. But the dynamiting for tunnels, for dams, and I think this is a violation because Deva Bhumi is where the Devtas stay. Our rivers are sacred. The Char Dhams are the 4 sources of our sacred rivers, our Mother Ganga. We aren't a stupid civilization to have respected these rivers, to have walked in penance for the Char Dham Yatra. We could have done everything that's being done today, but today we have an arrogance of conquest that has come from the West. And this idea of conquest doesn't learn lessons. 2013, according to local people, 20,000 people washed away. Because the tunneling made the mountains fragile. The debris from miles of tunnels were put on the riverbed. As the floods came, the riverbed rose, some places 40 meters, and took with it the bridges, the new townships, the schools. To have a disaster like this in the year 2021 is not a tragedy. It is a crime. Because the local people of Reni had been asking for this Rishi Ganga project to stop. They say, you're blasting our villages, you're making the mountains fragile, we're going to have a disaster. As it is, there are lots of landslides in that area. For 4 years, this project was stopped. It was started again because the commercial drive, the making of money by extracting everything you can, has damaged the mountains. And these mountains cannot bear this anymore. For us to think we will continue to build wider, we had a whole Supreme Court case. Why do we need 8-lane highways? I have traveled these mountains on foot. I have traveled these mountains on horseback. And even when to Badrinath we went by car, it was a 1-lane system. We had a gate. As I said, it wasn't that people didn't know how to build roads, but they knew the fragility of the mountain and understood the ecological limits that fragility puts on your behavior. We right now have become totally indifferent to our ecological civilization. We've become indifferent to our ecological movements and ecological science. And we think a contractor Raj of cement and construction will run this country. I hope this disaster will be a wake-up call.
Vandana, those are very, very strong words. And while emotionally I agree with you, let me try and give you the counter argument. And the counter argument is what you hear all the time. The mountains need roads. The villages want roads. How else do you develop the area? That you are creating a binary that is not possible for the contemporary age. And how have you drawn the linkage so quickly between the blasting of the mountains to build these tunnels and the bursting of the glacier?
No, I'm basing this on a detailed scientific study we did in 2013, where every landslide was mapped and every landslide was in a zone where blasting was happening for tunnel building. This issue needs study. And I'm so glad the ITBP and others are working. But we need the scientists to give a totally independent study of the kind we did in 2013. When you talk of roads, Roads are supposed to ensure mobility. When roads become the reason to end mobility, then there are no more development. I'll give you an example. When we used to travel to Badrinath with the gate system, we used to reach in 8 hours. The other day, when we were still flying, a group of people who had come to Badrinath for a yatra recognized me at the airport and told me about the yatra. I said, how long did it take you? I was imagining 10 hours, 15 hours. They took them 4 days. It took them 4 days to travel from Badrinath to Dehradun, because the more you blast the mountains, the more landslides you will have, the more road blockages you have. So the very objective of mobility is undermined by not realizing the fragility of the mountains and working along the ecological principles. We built roads before, but we are building roads in new ways. I remember a tragedy in the same Kedarnath Ghati, where one contractor with JCBs was moving the mountains on top, and another contractor below had workers, and the JCB on top allowed a landslide to happen. 12 workers died. 12 workers died. This is not about infrastructure. This is making money at any cost, not taking care of life, not taking care of ecology. And what I'm saying is, as a child shaped by Deva Bhumi, let at least Dev Bhumi speak to the people. Let at least the mountains and rivers that are sacred to this land and has shaped our imagination, let us at least have respect for them, even if you want to ignore the people. At least respect the Ganga and the Himalaya, for which our Ghanshyam Shailani used to make the most beautiful songs that inspired the Chipko movement. The tragedy is, in these last few decades, everyone who spoke about the dams, everyone who spoke about the rivers, has either died or gone to jail. Dr. Agarwal, the top civil engineer of India, IT Kanpur, died. 3 sadhus defending the Ganga in Hardwar of Matrisanan died. Sundarlal Bahuguna arrested. I think we need a white paper about the studies that have been done on the fragility of the mountains. We need a white paper on the status of feedback that came from the villages where houses are cracking, where springs are disappearing. You know, the mountain system has a very fragile water system, and it's through the cracks the spring comes. When you blast, a spring that came here disappears. It goes somewhere else. We need to be far more responsible in handling this very fragile system that has given us all the learning. If you look at any learned person, read anything beautiful, find any teacher of today, where did they go for learning? For the quiet in the caves of the Himalaya. The mountains are our teachers. We need to learn again to learn from them, rather than take the worst lesson of a colonizing West and say, I'm going to blast, I'm going to cement, I'm going to conquer. And you cannot conquer the Himalaya. You cannot conquer the Ganga. That is why the story of Bhagirath.